We are excited to be announcing our newest presenter sponsor, Pizant Building Products. Pizant Building Products has been providing contractors and builders with the supplies necessary to complete their jobs since 1964. They've built a reputation on honest, helpful, and quality service, serving the HRM for the last 58 years. Now with 7 locations in the HRM and 1 in New Brunswick. We look forward to having Pizant Building Products on the podcast in the near future. Welcome back to the Atlanta Construction Podcast. Today we're really excited to introduce Sarah Prodor from Architecture49. Sarah's the Atlantic Healthcare Sector Lead with Architecture49 here in Halifax, and we're grateful to have you with us today, Sarah.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is exciting.
Absolutely. I think it's really neat, the backstory on your career, how it developed from, being in the nursing field, in that industry for several years on the front lines as a healthcare worker, and now you find yourself as a healthcare sector lead with an architecture firm, and maybe we could start there and just talk a little bit about, as we usually do with our guests, and a little bit about their journey in the industry, and maybe touch on how that came about from nursing to architecture.
Sure. So I went into nursing right out of high school. I didn't think I wanted to be an engineer, but in retrospect, I should have probably done that. That would have been more relevant to where I am now.
I think a lot of women do pick nursing when it's kind of like
I had first aid. I had the
business
requirement. I was like, okay.
Right.
Yeah, and I didn't really know what to do, and I was like, well, and I probably would have done like a sociology degree or something. Like, I didn't know. I was 17. So, yeah, I went into nursing, and in the first couple of years, I thought, in the first year, I was like, I don't know if this is for me. My mom's a nurse. We have a bunch of nurses in the family. And when she heard I applied, I don't think I told her. And I think on my application, I actually wrote, like, I don't want to go into nursing just to date a doctor. Like, so nobody proofread that.
Which might be the motive for 50% of...
Well, I don't know. At 17, I was like, this is, I don't know, maybe a thing. I got in, and then one day in class, I was talking to a friend, and she's like, I want to go to Australia next year. Like, should we take a year off? And I was like, yes. And we went up to, like, the dean's office in the break of the class, and we're like, we're taking a year off. And in nursing, you're not allowed to take time off. They really want you to, like, push you through. You can only take 5 years to do a 4-year degree, or
right.
I don't know, they make you start over or something. So I went away for a year, and before I went away, I worked 3 minimum wage jobs, and I realized how hard it would be to not have an education and to work minimum wage and to actually afford things and pay for things. And this is an aside.
Sure,
but
go for it.
I worked at a fake plant store. Like a
Fake
silk plant store. And it was in my dad's like office building, and I don't know, I just like got this weird job. And in there was a lady who was about 60, and she had worked there for a while, and she was making the same as me, and she had a van that was broken down and a husband who was off on disability, and she was making $7.25 an hour. This was a while ago. And I thought, oh my God, my dad planted this person here so that I would go back to school. Because he was like, this is the option. Yeah. And I was like, oh, wow, that sounds really hard. I don't want to do that. So I went traveling for a year, came back, finished nursing, still got the best grades of my life in the second year.
But no one regrets traveling.
No, it was amazing. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I
went to New Zealand and bought a $200 car and drove around.
That's
and
awesome.
Got given a tent that smelled like cat pee, and it was great. It's great.
Got you from point A to B.
Yeah, and you learn a lot of things too. You see the world, and you see how other people live, and you see how other systems are in place, and things kind of work out, and things are better, and things are different, and so you kind of appreciate where you're from and the amazing things that the world has to offer. And I came back, and then third year I was like, ooh, I don't know about this. But then there was an opportunity to go to Africa for fourth year final practicum, and I really wanted to do that. So I stuck with it, went to Africa for my final practicum, and that was amazing. Had a really good time. Worked in an emerge that smelled like blood. You're like, oh, yeah. Why wouldn't it smell like blood? Everybody's bleeding everywhere.
That didn't bother you?
No, not really. And I worked with an orthopedic surgeon doing casting and kind of into crafts. And I was like, this is cool. I want to cast and casting things. And it's a cash and carry system. So somebody would come in, like a kid came in with a broken femur that's been broken for a month, which it would be super painful. But the community had to fund enough money for this kid to come in and get a cast. And they take an x-ray, you pay for the x-ray, and then they give you a list, and you have to go buy all the supplies to make the cast to come back. And I was like, wow, this is so different.
So the community rallied together the night for this kid's.
Yeah, and it was really beautiful to see.
We think we have healthcare problems here.
Yeah, right. Yeah, everybody needs to go traveling.
Yeah.
And see what people around the world are dealing with, and what people around the world have overcome. And so this amazing sense of community and working together and generosity and understanding that all humans are going through challenges and difficulties in their lives, and you never know what somebody's going to bring to the table. And if they're having an off day, it's probably not you. It's probably something that happened before. And to have that kind of understanding and empathy is super important, and has been
it's true. It's true what you said too. I go through that all the time. Where days will happen, I'm like, yeah, those 5 things that happened today that really bother me, that text or this person's interaction, it's like they're just having a bad day.
Yeah.
And here I am thinking an hour later, I wonder what it was. Did I say something wrong? I think we all do that.
Yeah, and it's hard. And so in architecture or something, somebody has a bad day, sends you a weird email, and you can't take it to heart. You just kind of have to follow up and ask them hey, what's going on? Usually you just need to pick up the phone and call them. And say okay, we need to figure this out. And the nice thing about architecture, as opposed to nursing, is these are all fixable things. No one is dying in architecture, and if they are, it's usually structural's fault. We don't.
It's usually structural fault.
It's the whole thing fell over. Exactly. I didn't stand for that.
No, it's an interesting point, though. I mean, it's not there's so much, with government dollars or private funding or major complex projects, but it's not different from nursing in the fact that somebody's life's always in the balance.
It is life and death, and that's why and nursing was amazing. I really liked the job, but throughout that I came back from traveling, and then I worked in a restaurant. So I was like, I don't want to be a nurse. And then I was like, oh, yeah, this sucks. So I went back and was a community health nurse. And then I also got into the NICU, so I worked in the neonatal intensive care unit, which is very intense. There's a reason why that intense word is there. And I saw people go off on disability all the time and have workplace injuries.
From your coworkers to staff.
Yeah, from coworkers. And the rate of injury for nurses is higher than for construction.
I was reading that in one of the articles from A49 Communications, People Focus magazine, and I thought that was a really interesting fact. Because construction is a tough industry to be in, especially on the site.
Yeah, and there's big machines.
There's a lot of risk, and safety is obviously the number one priority for everyone. But just to hear that stat kind of made me realize. I know the frontline workers have gotten a lot of attention, as they should, especially the last few years. Obviously, we don't have to talk about COVID, but they have gotten a lot of credit that they deserve. But maybe prior to that, and just that fact alone, kind of makes you realize that that's a tough job, mentally especially.
Oh yeah, and
maybe physically too.
But it's everything. So it's mental, physical, emotional, spiritually challenging, and there's no other jobs that do that. I'm not spiritually challenged at architecture, or not daily. Right. At least, right?
Yeah.
And
but you are trying to give a little soul to the building.
Well, yeah, but I'm not conflicted.
Yeah, no, for
nobody's
sure.
dying
You're
in
not
the
dealing
office.
with life and death, right? So there's got to be a spiritual element, psychological element, social.
It's really,
physical.
It's really, really challenging and physically demanding. And so I would look at environments that we were all in, and I would say all these repetitive strain injuries, the shelves are too high to reach. Everybody's got shoulder, back, neck things. And working in the NICU is just little babies, so that wasn't as hard because they're lighter, small diapers as opposed to big diapers. But I remember as a student having to roll over a 400-pound patient, and them looking at me being like, yeah, right, this isn't going to work. And I was like, there's no option. We have to roll you over, because like you can't just lie there all day. Like other things are gonna, like your back's gonna hurt, bed sores, these kind of things. So we just like made it work. But as I'm like reefing on this sheet and they're pulling from the other side, it's like this is how it happens. So like there's statistics like if you work for 7 years as a nurse, or you'll have at least one lifetime disability, which is insane. Because
that is insane.
Yeah, like it's
What
insane.
qualifies as a lifetime disability?
Something like repetitive
back,
strain
shoulder
injury.
problems.
Yeah, like I needed orthotics in my shoes when I was 22 years old because I stood on concrete floors for 12 hours a day, and they were not. That wasn't included in our benefits package. So it was like out of pocket $500 for shoes. That like my job directly, like I would get out of bed in the morning and my feet would just be so painful.
Right.
And so there's all these things that. And then so people, I would see staff members and colleagues go off sick, and because of like union rules, you can't replace a staff member, so you can bring someone in casual so that they keep their positions for when they come back. But then those casual employees don't get the benefits of being a full-time staff member, so they don't get like hierarchy for holidays or these types of things. And then it's oftentimes new grads who come in as casual because they're trying to get in, they're trying to make money, pay off their loans, and then they work tons and tons of overtime and they get stressed out and burned out and they leave. So there's this negative cycle of healthcare workers, and if you're not, like if I'm not healthy, I can't provide health. Like that just makes sense. And
like
so
a wounded healer.
It just seems
You got to take care of yourself first.
Yeah, and like we just
help
needed
others.
like anti-fatigue mats. I was like, well, they have them at like Superstore. Can I just get one of those?
So why do the floors have to be concrete? Can they be designed differently?
And it was a shelled space that was created into an ICU. I think they've since like redeveloped, so there's no windows. I have no idea. The shifts are 7 to 7 or 7 to 7. So you get out of work and you're like, is it daytime? Is it nighttime? Like I remember driving home at 7 in the morning and ending up in my parents' driveway because I still lived at home, and having no idea how I got there. I was like, this is dangerous, and working like night shifts and stuff just takes years off your life. So I was kind of thinking, I've always been interested in how environments affect health, and looking at different aspects of that. So it's not necessarily, it's materials, it's acoustics, it's lighting is huge, and all these things. And now there's more research about like noise in hospitals and all the beeping and the humming and the HVAC and all that stuff. And they can actually test stress levels in patients. Like if you're trying to sleep and you're trying to get well and you're lying in a bed and there is a glowing thing next to you that is beeping
And then
every 20
high
minutes.
frequency noise aside from that, from something else.
Yeah, and you hear the noise across the street or like across the hall. Yeah, someone's beeping. We can't find it. Yeah. It's stressful. So those environments are extremely stressful, like for the patients, for the staff, for all these things. And so we need to somehow curb that because stress doesn't equal health. Like if you're stressed out, your body can't respond, your body can't heal, and your body can't relax and give itself the things that it needs and the time that it needs to actually recuperate from anything.
Yeah, it's such a cool contrast that you have with, and I have no experience in the nursing field, but just now that you're talking about it, the high stress and the pace, and different in the way that it's life and death, and it's a different kind of environment. But construction's a lot like that too. It's very high stress, very high pace, very lots of different players involved, very complex, hard driven, lots of money at stake. Things need to get done in a very, very autonomous manner. And so before we get more into like some technical things and design and architecture within the healthcare field, and just how that you've taken your experience to in nursing to help design these projects, like to be more in line with the ergonomics and the individuals and what it's like to actually work, which you've been there yourself. Were you thinking that while you were a nurse, or like after 4 years of in nursing, like you kind of made a transition? Was that the thought right away, or did you just kind of sort of stumble your way toward architecture? Or was it more of a conscious?
No,
So it's not a pivot.
didn't.
It's like a totally different.
It's a completely different field. No, I didn't know. I don't know. I'm the first of 4 kids. They were just like, just go to school. I don't care what you do. Just get out of the house.
Because you worked with someone on the premise that you wanted to improve on the workplace environment.
Yeah.
Who was an architect.
Yeah.
Was he from McAllen? Who's in Winnipeg?
No,
There was
he's
something-
in Edmonton.
You're okay,
and so
right.
Ron Wickman specializes in accessibility and visitability. And his dad, Percy Wickman, was actually he was an MLA in Edmonton who
That's a great name.
was in, yeah, I know, right?
Percy Wickman.
Percy, and he was in a wheelchair because he got in a train accident. And so he was a huge advocate for accessibility like 50 years ago. So he was one of the first people to say, like, this is a big deal.
Yeah.
And I can't get in. And he was very well spoken. He was very smart. And so he was like, I can't get in to the same meeting that you're in. How do you expect anybody else to have this like access?
Because of the barrier-free
Because of the
design.
barriers, yeah. And even like walking around with a stroller or any kind of mobility aid, like, and especially in Halifax, all these 200-year-old buildings all have steps. They have big granite steps that nobody can get into. So it's really, really important. And so I started working with him.
That must be a pain for you to walk around downtown Halifax. I'm just
Well,
thinking
yeah.
all the things that you're thinking in the back of your head with these.
And I'm like,
Depending
that's
on who
not
designed the
accessible.
building, of course.
Yeah, right. And they're like, oh, there's a ramp by the loading bay and the garbage dump. And you're
Yeah.
like, okay, I really feel like an included member of society. So yeah, it's not fair. I'm a big fairness advocator. But yeah, I was in the NICU and I was working and I was like, I need to take some other classes or do something. So I took a cabinet making course. I'm almost a certified cabinet maker,
Oh, nice. Good for you.
which was fun. My
I've
dad.
taken a course in that too.
Yeah, it's fun.
It's a great trade. It's not an easy one.
Nope.
Very, very dialed
meticulous.
in.
Yeah, you have to.
32nd of an inch instead of a quarter of an inch.
Yeah, your cabinets do have to close.
Yeah. They do have to close.
Which is hard. But my dad has done a lot of like construction, and so he had a construction like company and is quite a good woodworker. And my mom is a nurse, so I very much like did both.
Right.
So I worked around like table saws and things as a kid, which I should not have done. But he didn't know that I did it until I presented him with the Father's Day coasters, and he was like, "Where did these wood pieces come from?" I'm like, "Don't worry, I wore
Snuck
eye
into the shop.
protection." So I always really liked building stuff, and so I took that class, and then I took a disability management in the workplace because I was like, "This sounds like what I want to do." But that was my teacher at the time. She was a nurse, and she was like, "Sarah, you're not going to be able to change anything with this job." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And she was like, "You're really overthinking it. This is just paperwork. You're just moving papers around." I was like, "Well,
As an architect, you mean? That was her advice?
BS." Well, this was just like a course, and she was like, "This is a
Right.
course for somebody to get into like a
you're
job."
not going to be able
that-
to pose any lasting
I'm
change
not
on
changing
that.
any. And I was like, well, I want to change stuff. This is not what I want to do. And then I took an interior design class. And my elementary principal was in there too. And I was like, "Oh, hello, madam." And I was like, looking for a career change. So one of the projects was kind of like a junior high project, interview someone that you want to be when you grow up.
Sure.
So I called around to different like interior firms and then to different architecture firms and kind of asked, and I was like, I'm interested in barrier-free design and accessibility and like how to work with kind of everyone and like how does this work in your firm? And they pointed me towards Ron Wickman, who specialized in that. So then I met up with him and I remember phoning him and he was like, "Oh, we should meet up. Why don't we like have a lunch meeting?" And as a nurse, like, we don't go to meetings. I've never been to a meeting in my life.
No, yeah.
Would
Or that's like a normal thing for
yeah.
most people in construction. It's like, let's grab a coffee or let's meet here. And
Yeah, and I was like, "A meeting? That sounds so fancy."
Yeah.
So we went for lunch, and he's like, "Well, can you, like, why don't you come in and help me do some research?" And at the time, he was like looking towards writing a book or doing a PhD and looking at some stuff. And as a nurse, like, I mainly did research, so I was like, okay, I can definitely do that. So then I would like go to the library and do things like drawings, and I'm kind of an artistic person before nursing. And so we came in and we worked together for a bit, and he paid me. He was like, "Never work for free." And I was like, "Okay, good to know." And he's like, "When are you going to apply to architecture school?" And I was like, "I don't know. I didn't do that great in physics." He's like, "You do not need physics for architecture." I was like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
And then I took a portfolio class because I didn't have anything to show. Did all kinds of crazy things. Did some sculptures, did some woodworking, did some painting, did like whatever. And and then I got in to Dal. And he kind of gave me a rundown of the schools, and he was like, "Dal kind of takes some oddballs. Like, they kind of take some they take a wide range of people, and he kind of gave me the rundown of schools. Some focus mainly on academics, some are very fine arts based, so that kind of stuff. And so
and the application process leaves it really open for them to accept a lot of different backgrounds. As yours, nursing, so healthcare, you've got these different courses in woodworking, cabinetry. So you got in.
Got in. I was like, oh my God.
So 6 years at Dell?
I did, so it's a Bachelor of Environmental Design, and so that was 2 years, and then 2-year Masters.
Okay, right.
So
4 years.
4 years, yeah.
And what was that like as an experience at the Dalhousie Architecture School? Like, it's a really demanding program, right?
It is.
60, 70-hour weeks. Did you sleep there ever at the building? I've
I
heard a lot of people
definitely, fell asleep. I don't know if it was intentional.
We all do that.
Yeah, I'd stay till the sun came up, and then present a design and be like, here's my stuff.
What day is it?
Yeah, no idea. Yeah, walking around the city. So I used to live here, and then I kind of came back, and I was like, it's a different city when I'm awake and not just an architecture school zombie. But yeah, it was super fun, and I loved. They have a metal shop and a wood shop, and it was really fun. We had a great class, and now, kind of years later, I just had a call today with an old classmate who's in Ottawa, and we're looking to team up on a project. And so now we have this amazing network of people all over Canada that we know and we trust, and we know their personality. Like, if you can get along with someone, you can figure out a problem. And so it was amazing.
That's a great simple quote. If you can get along with someone, you can figure out a problem.
Yeah, you can solve anything. In architecture and engineering, some things are like, ooh, yeah, that hole's too big, or they're all problems that are solvable, cost and all that schedule and stuff aside, but these are solvable problems, and there's a bunch of really smart people in the room that we can get together and ask and throw ideas around and say okay, what do we do here? We discovered this big sinkhole. How do we deal with that? Or things come up that you just could never anticipate, supply chain issues in a pandemic or what have you, that you just kind of have to roll with.
Yeah.
And if you have a good team and you have open communication and good dialogue and kind of that trust that, I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus. I'm not going to say oh, you said this and now it's your fault. That doesn't solve problems. That creates, I don't know, animosity amongst the team. And so I really like working with really good teams, and I'm super open, project manager and design team lead. And on the New Waterford Hub, there's so many people involved, but it's a really good team. Okay,
we should talk about the New Waterford Hub. But before we do, how did you get from, after your 4th year, graduated from Dal, did you move right into A49 at that time?
No, I've lived. No, I met, with Dal, there's co-op work terms. Right. My second work term was in Toronto, where I met my now husband. And he...
You both live here now in Dartmouth?
Now we both, he came with me. He's very flexible. It's great, which is what you need. So, I lived in Toronto, and I worked for a functional planning programming firm, one of the biggest ones in Canada, or they do the most amount of healthcare, Agnew Peckham. And I worked there for 6 months, and then I met a bunch of people through that kind of offered me jobs out west. And they're like, oh, you're a nurse and an architect?
Right. So that obviously was your focus right from the start. It was the healthcare sector, right?
Well,
just from your background.
Kind of. And I was looking for a job, and I was like, I don't know. And at first, I didn't think about...
To have a former
it's quite
nurse
rare.
As an architecture
There's
lead.
A few around. We kind of sometimes LinkedIn, we're like, hey, buddy.
Yeah.
But it is quite rare. Yeah. And so I didn't, and in school, it was not super useful to be a nurse. If I had a fine arts degree, that would have been more useful.
It wouldn't have helped you get through school.
No, but I did take a few people to Emerge if they cut their thumbs off doing X-Acto knives at 4 a.m. And so I did, and somebody somebody would come my stomach hurts. I don't know. I was like, have you eaten anything?
Yeah,
Drink
we could use more
water.
nurses around the construction sites these days too.
Yeah. So that helped, but I didn't know it was valuable at all. I didn't think it was a unique pairing. Nobody through school ever said you should do this. But I was always interested in how do people get into the building? How do we make this accessible? How does everybody benefit from this architecture? How do we get people in here so that they can enjoy this beautiful space? And they can get around, and it's not cumbersome. And just for the enjoyment of the public, let's create these crazy architecture school designs that would never stand up and no one would ever afford.
Yeah.
But that's the fun part. And then so I got out, and then a few people kind of offered me stuff out west, and I'm from Edmonton originally. So I ended up in Calgary at Stantec.
What part of Edmonton? What part of it?
I'm from the West End.
Okay.
Yeah, Rio Terrace.
Is that close to White Ave? Or?
No, that's the cool place. We lived in the, we can walk to school kind of place.
Okay.
But it's a great city, and it's huge.
Sure,
It's gotten way bigger. And the River Valley is really beautiful. And I lived there for a long time. And I didn't necessarily want to go back there right away. But Calgary is like quite pretty. It's got the mountains and rivers and stuff. And so I worked for a firm there, and I did a lot of work. I did some work in healthcare. I did some work on other things too. And then I didn't know at that point, like, do I want to pigeonhole myself into healthcare?
Right.
And as like, I'd just gone through like this career change as an architect, like, I don't know what I want to do. I just needed to pay off my loan. So I was like, okay, I got to work on this. And, but then I found, once I kind of deviated from architecture or from healthcare, I found that I'm passionate about healthcare. Like, I care about the people that are using it. And I know what it's like to be in a building that sucks and that has flickering lights and loud noises. And I know how it negatively affects people. So I was like, I kind of care about this. And with architecture, I think people are like, everybody's very passionate, and like architects are great, and they all have different passions, and that's what makes them good at their jobs.
Right.
And so why am I fighting this like innate passion to
It seemed
help
like
people?
you were on the trajectory, kind of like your destiny. With
But I like tried to push it away, and it came back.
Yeah.
So then I was working on a healthcare center up north in Norman Wells, and it was a clinic and a long-term care. And I was doing a lot of the furniture and equipment planning, which is a very hard job. And I didn't really, I learned a lot about it with that project. But then I also got to experience, the northern office was in Yellowknife, and I really liked their team. And I was like, okay, maybe I can go up there for a couple of years, and they did everything, like from rink boards to the legislative building, like just every kind of different project. And I was like,
right.
I want to go out here and really like diversify my portfolio and see if I really do want to do architecture, or if I want to do healthcare architecture, or if I want to do whatever, civic architecture.
Sports facility architecture.
Or like just random lift stations. I designed a couple of lift stations.
Right.
They are so cute. So they were like, yes, come on, but we really need a wrangler in the White Horse office, and we think you could do it. Like, we need to like pull this team together. And I was like, okay. And I was an intern at the time, because that process takes a long time. And so I worked on that project, and I got to work on fire halls, rinks, lift stations, 2 lift stations. At one point, we're like, we should do 12 and do like a lift station calendar, like a year. In Whitehorse. And it was gorgeous up there. And it's like every day going to work was amazing. And we had foxes on our front doorstep. And, you see like, we went to a site visit in Atlin, which is this amazing little town, kind of on the BC border, but you can only get through it through the Yukon. And we went and did a conditions assessment and looked underneath, and I was like, well, what's the structure of the building? Like, does anybody know? And we went down like in the basement, and the guy I was with took a rock and like bashed a hole in the wall, and I'm like taking pictures of the structure, and I was like, this is fun. And then on the way back, we saw a bear and then a herd of caribou, and I was like, this is the best day ever. Like,
This is pretty cool.
Outstanding. And I was like, this is an amazing job.
They're Canadian.
Yeah, and it's like real Canada.
Yeah.
Not like just like any city anywhere with all the same Best Buys and Ikeas.
Yeah, Gord Downey would be proud of that statement.
My partner, my sister's partner actually works for the Gord Downey Foundation.
Oh, nice.
Which is a cool job, but that's an aside.
Best lead singer.
Yeah, very Canadian. It's good. But then one day, my friends who I went to school with, and we actually went to India together in architecture school, so we got to know each other really well because we got stuck in a flood and almost died. So that really brings your team together.
Backstory.
That's aside. That's an aside. That's the next podcast. But then, so they called and they're like, we're looking for healthcare architect. And I was like, well, I've done some, but I've also done this other stuff. And it's kind of back and forth. And then we talked to them for a while. And then I got to meet like Stacy and the team. And I was like, oh, these guys are great.
I know her husband Thane a little bit. And Yeah, I've met Stacy a few times,
Mm-hmm.
personally, but also like maybe professionally a couple of times too. And she's always been a great person, very giving of her time. And
Yeah,
nice to
she
meet
can
her.
solve any problem. It's
Yeah.
amazing. And it doesn't matter
She's pretty
what it
sharp.
is. Yeah, and very like fair and equal, and it can hear people out
Yeah.
and really kind of pull important
Diplomatic.
things out of the conversation and kind of summarize things. I was like, that you're so good. Like I've never met anybody like that. She's amazing. Yeah, so that was a huge selling point. And I'd lived here before, so I kind of understood the city a bit, even though I was like walking in just a zombie land. And we were kind of looking to move, but we didn't quite know where, and we had family all over, but we had good friends here. So yeah, we made the trip, did it 3.5 years ago.
Wow, and here you are.
And here we are. Yeah, now I get to look over the harbor and be like, I can see my house.
Yeah, I said earlier that you take the ferry every day over from Dartmouth.
Yeah.
Great routine
I miss
there.
the ferry every day,
Yeah.
and then I get on it.
You miss it.
I'm like,
Get
no,
on it,
there it
yeah.
goes.
It's a little over 15 minutes.
Yeah,
or
it's
is it-
12.
They say it's every 12 minutes, but maybe it's
Yeah.
They're pretty keen on the timing, I think.
Oh, it's great. Yeah, there's very little traffic.
Yeah.
Sometimes a sea-doo. But yeah, so far it's been really good, and the team's been really good. And it kind of goes back to that, like if you can work with someone and you understand them and you have good conversations and you're really open, you can solve anything. And so I knew I had that with Chris and Kat, that are other architects at the firm. And and I knew that they would be honest about it. Like they're not trying to, like come in here, it's fun, and then it's just a total nightmare.
Right, yeah, just a little bit of love bombing and then a honeymoon phase, and then you realize maybe this was obviously that's the opposite. That's not what it was like,
Yeah, it's great. And coming from like a larger national firm into like a smaller national firm, it is really interesting to see the similarities and the differences, and I really like it there. It's really it's a really good environment. There's a lot of good conversations that happen. People are really concerned about people's like well-being and the quality of life versus workload and stuff. There's a lot of conversations. So I don't see anybody like crying under their desk or anything, which is
because A49 has a long history spanning over half a century. With obviously the office here in Atlantic Canada, but nationwide and beyond, right?
they have. So and they kind of were a conglomerate of all these different firms that kind of throughout Canada
came under one brand at one point or another,
and they all have their really kind of their focuses, and so it's really interesting to see those focuses and to be able to form those connections throughout Canada. So we have like a really strong labs group in Winnipeg, and so I like, and then there's a few really good healthcare people there too. So we're like, let's team up and let's do things together and let's kind of grow this collective knowledge within A49, so that it's easier. And then everything went online with COVID, and so it made it easier to work together in a sense nationally, because we're so used to picking up the phone and just saying like, hey, I have a question about finishes for long-term care.
Just to give our listeners some context, those that may not have any idea what it's like to be in architecture, or even, like in that side of the arena of construction. Like, if you read some of the taglines in A49, I just want to read from it, like, engineers, interior designers, landscape architects, urban planners, and what it means to be an architecture firm where you're permitting for, some of these large municipal projects, and, with government funding, or be it private, and, landscape architects are a certain arena of that as well. There's even courses now, I think, in Tallahassee, you can specialize in landscape architecture, and then interior design is a totally different thing. And so when you say architecture, people think A49, just the vast amount of expertise, and obviously yourself with the healthcare lead, and how different that sector is, for people that are in construction. If you're on the contracting end, like to price those large healthcare projects is kind of a different animal, different with the materials and the spec and the logistics, and just a lot more in depth, and obviously rightfully so with the complexity of healthcare, right, of the building itself, but yeah, just sort of to give some context of maybe those that are listening and wondering, what an architecture firm is or does, right? And there's just such a frontier of different
it is. Yeah.
different expertise and different.
Yeah, we have people in the office that have like a wide range of experience. And so all those individual pieces kind of come together to create your like prime design team. And so we work really closely with landscape and like landscape architecture. And it is like, I think now it is offered at Dell. When I went, it wasn't, but it always seems super interesting. And they have a really amazing take on things, and like the healing garden aspect of healthcare facilities is really important, and having that connection to nature is super important. It's evidence-based. Looking out at a tree versus looking out at a brick wall. There's studies that people will use less pain medication, and they'll be like pleasant to staff. They'll get out of the hospital 3 days sooner. Like the all money saving things where you're like, just put a tree and a big enough window to see it, and we could solve the world's problems.
It's funny. It made me think of like something I've been doing a lot throughout the summer. Is like if I'm having a stressful day, and like I've been working from home, or usually through the summer, or in the office of doing estimating or working on a tender or something, and I'll go down to Point Pleasant Park, like take my dog for a walk, and I'll just like to stop and like touch the tree, just like my hand touches something that's like not
nature.
A piece of electronics or not
not a screen.
And I'll just stand like for 20 seconds. I feel like kind of weird, but it
just
actually
hugging
works.
trees. It does.
A tree hugger. That's
But
it's walking
like,
the woods.
Yeah. And there's so much research.
It works.
Yeah, and it releases serotonins, and it like that biophilic design of because nature is not symmetrical, and we try to make things all line up and have linear things, but that's not what a tree looks like. Nature's like right out the window, there's all these kind of crazy shapes and things, and they move in the wind, and you can tell a lot by looking out your window at a tree. Yeah, you're like, what season is it? Is it nice outside? Is it raining? Like all these different things, and we're humans. Like we are animals. We're mammals. We are tall, hairless mammals, and we need to be outside. Outside, like being in dappled light, sitting under a tree gives us a sense of protection because we know that we're shaded. We know that we can climb up the tree if a big animal comes to get us. Like there's all these things that are like inside every single one of us that need that like holistic balance of like nature, and our bodies need it. Our eyes need to see it. Our brains need to process it. We need to smell it. It's all those senses that need to be stimulated. And when you go inside a hospital, you come into the ambulance bay, it smells like exhaust. You get wheeled through the door. And if you don't have family member to take you outside, you could be in there for months.
It's more like you're entering into like an assembly line.
Well, and you don't breathe fresh air. A lot of hospitals they don't have operable windows, but being able to provide, like you could smell outside and you can see outside and you can breathe fresh air, like that would make such a huge difference in people's care.
Right. So I'm thinking about some different hospitals that I've, either looked at the drawings or kind of been around, or just even personally, like just visiting there or whatever. Like oftentimes there's not a lot of windows in a lot of the rooms, right? With the layout. I mean, there's like
windows
a lot
are
of
expensive.
Glazing on the entrance and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So is it mostly the cost, or is it because whatever is functional in the room?
It depends. Sometimes it's glare or something. But I've designed an operating room with like high. Yeah, it's a big piece of glass is expensive, and also depending on the direction that it's facing, it could let in a lot of light. But then you just fix that with some like shading and that kind of thing, because it's still more important. Because the HVAC system really played a huge part in a lot of designs in the past.
In
hospitals,
healthcare,
in healthcare. Yeah. Because like if you have a lot of south-facing windows, you're going to be like you just have to re-regulate your HVAC systems, and they would be much more robust, where it's easier to like make smaller windows and have less costs that way. Right. But the hospitals of the past were kind of built with more to do with the systems and less to do with the people in them. So they were very much like an experiment in building systems.
Yeah, because unless it's an atrium or a pedway, like there's no glass, there's no glazing.
So, and I think that is slowly changing. I mean, I've been advocating for like holistic design for years, but I think people kind of get it now because of COVID, because a lot of people were isolated in their homes and they felt that sense of isolation. And that's a sense of isolation people feel in hospitals all the time. But if you've never been in a hospital and you've never felt that, you don't know how bad it is.
Yeah, especially if you're there for a long stay.
Yeah, if you're there for a long stay and you're trying to get better and you can't because you're stuck in this beige room with all the beeping and the noises and the bright lights at night and
no windows.
No windows, or a window that like looks into a wall and you can't
exactly.
see anything. And so you have no idea. You lose track of yourself. You lose track of like natural like life cycle of seasons and trees and bugs and plants and birds, and like you're totally disconnected from the only thing that connects us is being outside in nature. And so, my thesis was actually like converting a cancer institute and putting these huge healing gardens inside and bringing all the therapies out into the gardens. And putting like a daycare in there for the staff or for somebody who needs to come in and get chemo treatment and they're there for 6 hours a day. What do you do with your kids? So if you can drop them off and you know, like you have that sense of relief that they're being taken care of, they're having fun, you can actually heal because you're not stressed out. So removing those stresses from the environment, not only, and it's not hard to do. That's a big weight
off someone's shoulders.
Yeah.
Just to know their kids are safe.
I want a daycare at A49.
Yeah.
We threatened it at COVID. We're like, we're going to turn Stacy's office into a daycare. We're like, there's enough kids. We can all just bring them here because they were all closed. So it's and some of the bigger firms, like I think the office in Stantec actually did get a daycare. And so we advocated for that for years because it's so much easier. Yeah. And so like in long-term cares, I advocate for like, we need a big space where you can bring in a farmer's market. Like as a nurse, if I could get off shift, buy fresh vegetables and get home, that would be amazing. It takes like an extra step. It takes an extra stress away from delivering like healthy food.
Starbucks in the common area.
Yeah, or picking up like a chicken on the way home. Like that's fine, but it's another stop. Yeah. Like this is easy. If you make it easier for people to be healthier, and that's a win-win.
Those kind of lifestyle elements and just those kind of generic elements of the way people are living at the time you can incorporate into the design experience, right? That maybe a lot of people might not even pick up on it right away, but they just think, oh, that's great, like I can pick that up on my way out. And they might not maybe give credit to the architecture firm, but it's almost like, I really like it here. I wonder, I can't really put my finger on it, but this is a great spot.
Yeah, I've stayed at my job for 15 years and I have these fresh eggs. But it's and it's not impossible things to do, and it doesn't have to be expensive either. So I think that's kind of the balance that you have to do. And I find things like over medicalized, and now they're kind of coming back a bit. But our medical system is very focused on treatment, but you have to get sick enough to get treatment, and so the rest of our senses, like our social, physical, mental, emotional, like that all creates this holistic person. And so if one part of that physical part is needing medical attention, the rest of those systems still need attention. Yeah. And that can be like a nice conversation. It can be like, oh, I don't have to worry about like somebody trying to take care of my kids while I'm trying to get my cast off, or like all these little things that allow us to live our lives in a less stressful way. And stress has like a huge impact on our health. Like, and now there's like more studies coming out about it, which is great. But we all know that. Like, if I'm not stressed out, I'm having a great time. When I'm stressed out, it affects everything. It's not just like the stressful event that like, oh, that like email, or I need to get this done or this done. It ripples through. And so if you can kind of figure out ways of decreasing that stress in ways that help people do their activities of daily life in an easier way, it just makes sense. And architecture, we can kind of do that, which is great. We just have to weave it into the design, because nobody's going to pay me to put in a big green wall, which I want to do everywhere.
It's really interesting because we are, as humans, physical, social, psychological, and spiritual, kind of like four different. You could, and it's like a lot of spaces and a lot of jobs, and it's hard it takes a lot of effort to treat people as whole. It takes. We're not always so very good at it,
and our system's not set up for that at all. Like there's huge gaps.
As people and as systems, we're not always very good at treating the whole person. Even in even like you said earlier, the medical field, or if it's the counseling, psychological field. Focus on one thing from the past, or might have been traumatic or something, but there's, they're not always treating the whole person. Right? It could be something physical, but it could be the manifestation, surface manifestation, something that's going on that's totally different, part of one of those other four categories.
And then you're wondering, well, like, why am I not getting better? I've gone to physio for a year, and you're like,
spending all kinds of money on treatment and everything. And they do it for years, and they try this and the next best thing, and really the root problem is something in something else altogether.
Except they're lonely. They just needed a dog.
Yeah, or they need to be outside more.
Yeah, they need a plant. Like, seriously. Yeah, there's
crazy
huge.
to think about it that way.
It is, and it's not impossible to do, and it's not hard, and it doesn't have to cost a lot.
Sure, yeah.
It's just like treating humans as humans, and and understanding the fun things in life. Like there's books and there's research papers about they looked at long-term care, and they had two kind of resident households, and they gave everybody a plant. In one household, the staff took care of the plant and they watered it, and then the other side, it was up to the resident to take care of this plant. And they found that the people who took care of plants were happier. They ate better. They slept better. They had less medication, like narcotic or kind of,
because it kept them busy, and they were seeing the progress, like seeing it grow.
Yeah,
it just gave them something to do,
and something that depended on them. Like, and as humans, we go through our lives, and people
Right.
depend on us for stuff, and then we get older, and those.
and that feels good as long as we have boundaries and we're not. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a plant, right? Like it's like $3.99. You can get it at Superstore. And it's the same for like having animals coming in, and like therapy dogs and cats, or having like a bird. My Nana had a bird in her long-term care, and she was kind of antisocial a bit. She lived on her own for a very long time, and she was like, I don't want to talk about bingo. I don't like it. But she would go and talk to the bird. And this little songbird sat in the corner, and she would hang out with the bird. And it was great. It gave her something to do. The bird recognized her, which is like a huge, like you feel.
Look how many people who weren't dog owners before the lockdowns.
COVID.
Are now dog owners. So.
Yeah, and it's that companionship and that dependency and that like sense of worth and that's all we need. Like it's not. We don't need super fancy finishes, or I don't need to feel marble. Like that doesn't. I mean, it's nice and it's cool, but
aesthetically, and
but it doesn't depend on me for food.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting to see the depth of the thought process like that goes into the design. Because I mean, if you're construction, I guess I can only draw from my experience, like from a former contractor, estimating and things, and just worried about the materials and how much they cost, and what's going to be, what's the labor allowance, what's this going to be like to install, what's the transition to the next scope. But there's so much depth.
And like feeling natural wood is like,
Yeah.
this is important for us. Like we recognize
and that's a really
this
popular
feeling.
thing now. I mean, every second restaurant you go into has live edge and some kind of natural hardwood countertop.
And it's tricky to do in healthcare. And we did a really interesting research.
Why is it harder in healthcare? Just because of
because
it's
it's
sealed,
fibrous, and
the UV, like for the lacquer and things like that. The off-gassing.
And traditionally, they would put it in a horizontal surface. So if you're trying to clean it, you would get cleaners pooling on it, and that would degrade the lacquer and the finish, and then it would create kind of openings to it, and then that could harbor
So that's a big
other
thing
things.
in healthcare is how cleanable is the surface.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like how
The ratings
that's
are
all
like
that
5,000
matters.
wipes. No, it's like
Yeah.
500,000 wipes.
Yeah.
So like I need to be able to clean this with the harshest
That's why
chemicals on
everything's stainless steel. Everything's solid surface. Everything's.
But the interesting thing was with COVID, and this was a National Geographic article that I read with COVID, because of the way it's encapsulated, when it landed on a natural surface or like a wood surface, that it would actually like absorb that outer shell. So it would decrease transmission, natural surface or like cardboard, paper, wood, as opposed to stainless steel or a solid surface. It would sit on there for days. So it was kind of opposite. So like everything we kind of knew about disease transmission and viruses and cleanliness and stuff was like kind of thrown out the window, just of the nature of the virus, which is really, really interesting. And so, typically we do vertical surfaces in wood, because then you don't get that pooling. You don't get that. It's still wipeable, but you're not going to wipe your walls as much as you would wipe a table, chair arms, that kind of thing.
So you see a lot of like wood slat walls.
Yeah,
with maybe
yeah.
a fabric back or something, different things like
Yeah.
that.
And that just adds like warmth to it. And that would be something you would have in your house. You would have like wood cabinets. You would have wooden furniture, that kind of thing. But yeah, we just keep it up and vertical. And so it's super important to like the daily lives of the people that live there. So it's not just that we like wood, like architects are like, I want the fanciest wood. You're like, no, this is for a reason. It's not just because we want to make your life hard and putting up these equally spaced slats. It's for acoustics, it's for touch, it's for feel. It stimulates all those senses that release serotonin that make people happier.
Right. Yeah. No, that's really interesting, that all the depth that goes into design features like that, because I think on the construction end, probably not thinking about those things.
No.
Like, oh, that's going to help the stress levels of the employees for the serotonin. That's it's a good aesthetic feature and it looks great, and it's a lot of people passionate about wood and different things. But I was reading something about one of the, I'm not sure if this was something that you worked on personally, but it was a situation where I think there was food prep's obviously a big thing in healthcare, and the kitchen areas and stuff. And I think it was something about live game, and a different entrance next to the kitchen for this certain type of food to enter, and then different storage. And I thought that was pretty interesting. Was that in Iqaluit?
Yeah,
one of the
I was up in
projects there?
Iqaluit.
Yeah. So whenever for a segue into, what are some concrete, or can you give some specific examples? Like maybe we could talk about the New Waterford Hub or the Mahone Bay long-term care facility, some of the local projects that you're working on for Architecture49, and maybe just give some examples of like what that's like to be part of the New Waterford Hub and working with the team there as the designer, and then having meetings with doctors who are a part of this project, who've rallied to, and incorporating their thoughts into the design, and where do you get kind of pigeonholed, and just to give some context of like how much of it is financial, the decision makings, or how much of it is, I mean, money's always the bottom line, it seems, but
it is.
But just take us through, and then maybe some unique examples of how you're using your experience as a former nurse to just little layout things or certain types of materials, like on that project or past examples. That was kind of long-winded, but
yeah, I will choose one thing about it. Talk about it. The New Waterford Hub is a truly amazing project. I think it will be a really good example of how there's going to be a lot of lessons learned from it, because I think a facility and like a community hub like that would be so beneficial to like many, many communities throughout Canada, and like through the States and stuff too. So it's got a 6 to 12 high school. It's got a community center. It's got a 60-bed long-term care and a health center. And my favorite, it's got a food bank. So it's got, and a community garden. Those are my two favorite. They're small compared to the rest of it. But they make it so that people, like those barriers to accessing healthcare are removed, because you can go into that building for any host of reasons. So you're not going to the psychiatrist who is on this door and everybody in town knows where they are and what you're doing and knows your business. You can go into this building that has all of these things. Oh, it also has a 500-person theater. So.
A what, sorry?
A theater. It's for the high school,
nice.
But the community will be able to use it, and it's kind of in that
for stage plays.
Yeah.
So
and for music,
right,
and for
right.
there'll be a big
awesome.
Stage and big.
So it'll be used for public events too. Oh, that's great, great.
So they can have big musical events and things come in.
And that's got to be
Matt Anderson.
Yeah, that's
He's
got to
gonna
be
play
neat to be part of designing.
Yeah.
How the theater layout is, like an amphitheater kind of layout with the.
It's got kind of
at the
telescopic
lower.
bleachers,
Okay.
and then the stage is up so that you can put chairs and stuff underneath it. And Catherine Heffler, who's our school expert and designer, she's kind of been spearheading all the school stuff because she knows all the rules to that. But they have amazing programs with local, like there's someone who is really interested and has a lot of experience in sound technology, and so he's bringing in all this stuff that a high school would never have, and teaching kids about like putting together a podcast or like all of the different things that a school wouldn't normally have, but we're creating kind of a sound booth for him that fits all this amazing equipment. So there's a lot of like really unique people in the community that have really interesting parts of it that just like layer on the complexities of the project and kind of weave that fabric through the project. So I always thought it was really great that the kids from the high school could go and get like work term experience or like high school volunteering in the senior center or the health center, or that some like a kid from high school who is looking out for their family, which there are lots of in that area, they could go after school and pick up stuff from the food bank and go home and have dinner. And you don't have to make an extra trip. You don't have to take the bus anywhere. It's just right there. The community center is really amazing. There's like a public shower there. And so if somebody's trying to get back on their feet and they're going for a job interview, they can go and have a shower, which is really hard when you're homeless, is to find a shower.
Yeah.
And how are you going to get a job if you don't look presentable? And so there's all these really amazing.
That's actually a really good feature for the homeless.
Yeah.
Is there anything like that in the HRM area, in downtown?
I don't know.
I see a lot of homeless people from where
I know.
I walk by the same ones at where I live, and
I think
some of them
could use a shower.
I mean that in a generous sense, but like it would be nice for them to have that.
Well, you feel better, right? And you can, and there's, and I'm not too sure. I think the public library, I don't know if there's a shower, but there is a washroom there that I think people shower in, which is fair. I would too. It's like a clean, safe place.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of people need.
Right.
And so I think that there's kind of a big push for this to be like an integrated hub, and I really think it will be, and people will be more comfortable being able to get in and access services that they couldn't get to before. So there's going to be a few different clinics within it. There's going to be some primary care, some mental health. There's a few other. There's like it's not an emergency, but it's kind of like a drop-in kind of emergency, and it.
It's really neat.
It's everything.
Project. It's not like that must be quite unique as far as like the
It's
things that
very-
you've been able to be part of in the last 4 years here in your position.
Oh yeah, and it's like across Canada. Like as architects, we're like, this is what needs to happen. Like all these
Right.
things come together, so they can
School, health
potentially.
center,
So you're like
long-term care.
all your education, and then the long-term care people can actually be part of the community. So they are not sitting on top of a hill from a site that was donated to
In a
someone
12
because
by
it was
12
cheap.
room
Yeah,
by themselves.
looking out over the ocean, which is lovely.
So will they
but it's very
interact with
isolating.
the students?
Not well. It depends. Like depends on how.
Head down to the theater on a
They can go to
Thursday
the
night
theater.
with a little cup of soup. And,
Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah,
or to be able to
sure.
go and see a Christmas play and not actually have to like go outside.
Yeah, that would be good.
And to be able to
I'd
go.
like to see my grandmother in a place like that.
Yeah, and go to a doctor's appointment easily, so you can get to it. So it's all these things that are being broken down, and then they can like watch the kids come and go from school, watch the buses. Oh, and then there's a sports field across the street. They could like watch a sports game. And
Lots of glazing in this one too.
there is, and operable windows, so that people can feel the ocean breeze coming through, and it's really important. And so they can go down to the community gardens. We have a really wonderful partner who needed a new space for the community gardens, so she's bringing over some greenhouses, and we've left a space on site that is like southwest facing, and people can come and learn how to garden. There's horticultural therapy. The school kids can have plots. They can do things with that. And then it's right next to the food bank. So imagine getting fresh fruit or like fresh veggies in your food bank order. It's not just a bunch like dried macaroni and tuna. So it's like really all these things coming together that are so beautiful and wonderful.
What phase is the project at now?
We are so the school had to come first. So we're building a new Breton Education Center.
Yeah.
That is, foundations are poured. And
Next to the existing.
Next to the
Since
existing.
the 60s or, yeah.
Yep, and the existing facility. So once the new high school is built, then the second phase of the project is demolition of the existing school, kind of cleanup of that site, and then that's where the health center long-term care is going to go. So there is a bridge that goes over top, and it sits on the community wellness center, and so there is that connection that way in a big interior courtyard, and yeah, it's going to be so great. I'm really excited
It's a
about
fascinating project.
it. So I think it'll really help. It'll help the community kind of come together and share resources too. So potentially there's like operations maintenance costs. Like you could have one team that would do everything, and there's all these like synergies that kind of come up. And it's been interesting to work with the like Board of Education and Health Board, because they've never had
In
to
tandem?
Yeah, because the health portion and then the school portion,
they're getting along,
but they've never had to come together. So they kind of exist in silos, but everybody believes in this project, and so everybody is really like trying their best, and it's the first one, so nobody
Yeah, and there
has
must be
the
a real
rule
sense
book.
of excitement of
Yeah.
how much it's going to provide that hub for the community. I mean, it's
And so far we've had like really great engagement sessions with the community, and we've had a really positive feedback. And
So is that process a lot different for yourself and for Architecture49 in the healthcare sector to work on that with the health and the education boards?
So I'm the design team lead, so I kind of get to see all of it. So we have double consultants on everything, and so it's this huge team kind of working together. And then I also get to work with the education lead, and I've never designed a school, so now I get to see how that goes together and see the schools in Nova Scotia are built to like a DC 350 standard, and the system's set up for like approvals and what they like and what they don't like. Like it's so great. Like they're doing a great job. They've done their research. It's a really amazing system. And to see how that works so well, I think could really translate into other sectors that I would never get to see both of those things at the same time.
Right.
So yeah, there's definitely some like positives from both sides of it, and then having to work with like double consultants on everything. So we're like, okay, there's one part of the building that like everybody is touching.
Right.
And we're like,
Intersection
this is
point.
this is the pivotal moment.
Yeah, it's the octagon.
And we just have like so many talks about stair 6. Like it's just
Right, yeah.
But everybody is working together. And so it's interesting because like the 2 structural teams and 2 mechanical teams, but they're also learning from each other. Like, how do you do this? How do you do this? Oh, this is the detail you use, and we would use this. And so it's like this huge team effort to put this together, and it just builds that like team kind of understanding and respect and appreciation for everybody's skill set and everybody's knowledge. So it's really cool that way. And then the government side, like NS Lands is doing an amazing job.
This is a tender from NS Procurement.
Yeah. And so, and they're really passionate about it. And it's also a new kind of typology, building typology for them. And then the education board and the NSHA, the health side, like they're really great, and they get to meet each other, and they get to see how each other work, and they get to see how these systems, like they can help each other and feed off each other and kind of grow together. It's super interesting.
Is that a big part of your job as the lead at A49 to be answering those RFIs throughout the couple months of the tender process on behalf of the government procurement? Okay, so that's a big thing, because you're just probably answering question after question.
So
all
many
day, every
questions,
day.
and so many like hard questions.
Scope. Oh yeah, I'm sure. I can't imagine.
And evaluating alternates and making sure that they comply. And I have a team right now at the office that is working.
Right? Yeah, because it's one thing to, if you're involved with one scope with some overlap and transition with a few others, but it's another thing if you're looking through the whole spec book and it's your job to answer all these questions on every single scope item on the construction side. That's
And everybody has their specialty, so that's why we work as a team. There's no way anybody could do this by
Of course.
themselves.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've got some like amazing teammates, and we've really kind of banded together, and we got to know each other really, really well, really fast, because we needed to, and we need to work as a team, and we talk constantly about stuff. We go back and forth with procurement, and what about this wording, and how does this work, and what are we like, and because sometimes the questions that come in, we don't know how to read them, or it's unclear. So we're like, well, we could
Right.
answer it this way, but I don't know if that's what they mean. And then procurement's like, what if they're asking it in this way? And this we're like, oh yeah, okay. So we all talk about it. So it's always like us and the client and the owner, and if it's school related, we'll bring in the school director, and we'll bring in different teammates depending on what the question is. And so it's really collaborative, and we'll say, okay, like how do we answer this the best way possible so that we can get the best bids on this tender package? Because
And
that's
keep the
ultimately
playing
what we
field
want.
level by
and making
answering
it
all those
fair and
technical questions. It's, because that, I mean, could maybe keep the cost down, but it's gonna maybe get you the best contractor too. It's all. Do you see it as a positive thing if someone's asking lots of questions? It shows they're engaged.
It is,
It makes your job a little harder, I guess. But like,
But it is, and you want to be clear on what you're bidding on, because you don't want any
absolutely.
surprises when you get to site. Like if there are questions, you fire them at us.
yeah,
Like
it must be tough because like it takes 20 years to be an expert at one scope. So it's like you've got to answer all these really fine details of maybe like a. What I'm trying to think of a practical example, but like even just like some aluminum trim next to the door. Like,
Sure.
Is this what's
Is this
where that spec
acceptable?
matches? Or
And something like gym floors, they're very, very specific, and they have to have. So and I'm not an expert in gym floors, which is why I have a team of people.
So there's a gym floor in the school area, right?
Yeah, there's two gyms.
Yeah.
So one's on the
Two
community
gyms.
side, and then one's on the school side.
Okay.
But they're both kind of used by the school and the community. But it has to have a certain amount of like flexibility and bounce to it, and that there's certain
Spring-loaded
criteria, and wood, and so there's a lot of things that go into it that I wouldn't know until I worked on a school.
Right.
And so evaluating equals is really hard, because if we get it wrong, it's definitely going to be wrong. And they have a huge coal bowl event, which is like
equals to the spec of flooring material.
Yeah, and it's huge, and that is a big event for the community. They worked super hard on making it. It's like a national basketball tournament, and it's great. And teams come from all over Canada.
Yeah.
And so if that floor sucks,
architect.
we're gonna hear about it, right?
Yeah, no, exactly.
And we don't want that. We want them to
Is
have.
there a lot of installers that would price like? Is there a lot of competition in the region for that specifically?
It all depends. So we don't really. No, there would be, but we don't know what everybody else is working on too.
Yeah, that's right.
And so we want to put stuff out that we know we'll get competitive bids on. And we want to make it open enough so that if someone might have like a comparable product, but they haven't been able to get in, they can kind of prove themselves and get a contract. And we want to be really like open to that, but we also want to make sure that we don't accept something that might not, like in the shop drawing stage, if it doesn't add up and we've gone through 5 rounds of shop drawings, it comes to site, fails all its tests, like that's going to cost money, it's going to cost time, it's going to delay the schedule, it's going to be a huge nightmare for everybody. So we don't want to do that to the project, right?
Have it hashed out before.
So we have to do our due diligence beforehand. But it's a really interesting process to go through, because each one of those questions is different. It gets
so much brain power, so much mental
and like group brain power too.
group brain power.
So it's a lot of back and forth, and there's a lot of kind of things that we try to take into consideration.
And even if that process is done really well as an estimator in different scopes, like you kind of have to be aware enough that you might have to add a little bit here because you're just not quite sure about certain things, or just to make sure you're covered if this or that, or even when it's a really, really good, smooth process. Like it's.
Yeah, and that's why asking questions is great. If they're like, well, I don't know about this part, this could be a liability. Just ask. Like that's why we're here. That's why we have the tender process. Like we have a specific scope for tender.
Yeah.
It's really a crazy time, but
so when it comes to the whole design phase and the money that's been set aside or divvied out from the government, federal or provincial, and like the different boards that you're working with, like do you have full kind of creative control there within the budget? Like none at all.
No.
The opposite of that.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's, I mean, we have to get like cost estimates at every stage of the design.
Yeah.
And so we'll see kind of where things land. And we always try to be.
This is after you've put in your proposal and been awarded it.
Yes.
So then you take it from design point zero.
Zero to like, where's our site? Yeah.
But for you as the lead and your, things that you would like to see, or even the team of doctors that might be involved, they want to see.
Oh, yeah.
Is some of those things impossible to come to fruition?
They
just
get first dibs.
They get first dibs.
Because they're the client.
Yeah.
And so, and there's some things that, we kind of work with it too. So I would love to see some like public
And you're not
art.
always working with a team of doctors either, right? Like
No.
Usually you're not.
No, we like for clinical, if it's their space, they're definitely involved. And
Right.
like we want to hear
Yeah.
what their needs are and how we meet them and how they work and how they function and how we find some efficiencies of flow. Like if somebody works 2 days and somebody works 3 days, could you share a clinic room? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
So try to find out, because we don't want to build a big empty building, because it's going to cost a lot. And then it leads to like a hollowness. Like you want to have your space active, and that kind of goes with like security and safety and stuff too. So we like try to find out how to best design for what the space is going to be used for today, and then think in the future, okay, are you planning on onboarding a whole bunch of new doctors? Are you planning on increasing the services in your clinic to do more intensive things like IV therapy or endoscopy or dialysis or something? Like we kind of want to make that space flexible and adaptable, because healthcare changes all the time.
There's so much heavy interference drawings, right? Like every wall assembly has like, 5
gas is
times
running
what the
through
normal,
it.
Yeah. Crazy.
So we really have to think about like the right now, and then we need to kind of guide people to say, okay, like what about the future, and like what are their goals? Like if they're a new doctor and they are 30 years old and they want to live in New Waterford for the next like 50 years, where do they want to see their practice growing, and where do they see the gaps in health that this space could occupy? So then we can build to make sure that can happen, so that we're not like pigeonholing them into this building that they can't use in the future. So it's very much like client driven on that part. And then in terms of budget, I personally don't have control. I did.
I'm sure that's a frustrating factor, but if you're in healthcare, then
it's all
I'm assuming that it's all public funds.
Yeah. And we have to be very accountable about, like, we're not putting in marble countertops. Marble stains terribly, so we would never.
Well, some long-term care facilities might be private.
But they are private. But they're also, but they also have to be accountable to their board of directors and their members and stuff too. Yeah. So there's, in healthcare is always very tight, but then they have very high like roles and responsibilities and rules for safety and security. And so we have to use certain types of materials in there. But then things that are...
Give an example.
Like we have to... It's a post-disaster building. And it's a high building. So we can't use...
As far as the number of stories or the ceiling height?
It's classified that because of its occupancy.
Oh, okay.
So because it's a health center and because there's long-term care and there's a short stay, a 12-bed short stay wing, which could have a higher acuity of patients in it. Right. And they're coming from the hospital. They can't quite go home yet, so they're going to stay there for a couple of days and then go home. So for rehab and for that.
Sure.
So we can't use materials that have a flame spread rating.
Right.
That is, don't quote me, this is a code thing. In like vestibules and stuff, it can't be over 25, and in public areas over 150 or something like that. Yeah. So that means in staircases, we can't use rubber stair treads. Can't use them, not allowed, because they start on fire and melt. And
is that why the floors are typically hard concrete? Yeah.
And that's why they're a harder material. And sometimes those, or if we use like this strip on the edge of the stair that has ridges in it so you don't trip over the stair, you don't slide off of it, that could be a tile. So it's a hard surface with a low flame spread rating. But that's also more expensive than the vinyl strip. So there's certain things that we don't have control over, and we need to meet those requirements because it's with the CSA guidelines and the building code. And so healthcare has a lot more of those than other than schools or than
just
fire
your typical
stations or
commercial building or
typical,
retail spaces.
retail apartments, mixed use, whatever.
For sure.
So our ability to be fancy is like
Hindered by a lot of things.
By a lot of things. So that's where I like to get like public art or local artists or things to kind of come in and either do like a public art competition or something in there, so we can get things on the walls and we can get things that are local and we can really help support that artistic community, because that's also like a huge part of it. Like good art or even any art is stimulating. It's interesting. Even bad art stimulates conversations, still art. And those are more like economical ways of bringing in beauty into the design, as opposed to expensive materials or that kind of thing. So there's ways
of...
of...
that Robin Williams quote in the Dead Poet Society. It's like engineering, and all. He mentions all these careers, and these are all things we do to make a living, but art's why we stay alive, or something like that.
Yeah. And it's true, and there's like some beautiful art up in Cape Breton, and like amazing artists, and there's like weaving.
Best musicians in Atlantic Canada, aren't they?
Yeah.
Newfoundland, I guess, a little bit too, and Halifax.
But
a lot of good ones from Cape Breton.
Yeah, and it's that culture and that community and that stuff that makes us feel good and makes us put a smile on our face, and the things that we through our lives get accustomed to and appreciate. But then when you're in long-term care, where is it? So that continuum of life that we want to, like, that's how I want to get older. I want to still have the same things I have now, but I also might need a little bit of help. So it's interesting to try to weave in some of that like beauty and some of that art and some of that nature, and that's the stuff that makes a really big difference, and that stuff's not expensive. So I try to get, but as like an architect, I can't be in charge of the public art. So that has to be kind of driven by the community. So we try to find community partners that will
facilitate it, though.
And so if there are any artists in Cape Breton listening,
that'd be great. If hopefully there's some of them are listening, or some
would be
even
so
local
great.
people. It's really neat for them to get an inside look at the lead architect on that project in the community, especially something that's going to be there for the next 50 to 100 years, and it's going to be a center point of the community. It's a big deal to a lot of people, and
it would be so
why
great.
wouldn't you want to have a say in something that's involved in the design, or how things are going to look, or have something up on the wall,
and show your stuff off and bring it in and have and I would love to have almost like a gallery, like a room, so you can have rotating exhibits. And they have them in like very fancy offices and whatever law offices and stuff. But like, it would be
Deloitte's
so
got a
much.
few of those.
I was like, Deloitte has a huge art collection. But why can't we have that in a health center? And it would reach so many more people. And it doesn't have to be fancy. Like, I have a picture that my kid drew on my fridge. It's amazing. We're gonna frame it. It's like, it's got 100 arms and one eyeball, and you're like, this is art. And it doesn't need to be amazing, but there are amazing artists out there. And so just having that kind of wide range of people, and that's what the whole facility is about, is like it really should be for everybody. And so everybody should be represented in it.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most interesting parts of even like the show that we're trying to produce, and in the construction industry, is there's so many neat buildings that mean so much in different capacities to our communities. And there's a lot of there's just a lot of depth to them, and it's neat to talk, just to sit and talk about the backstories, or what went into the design, how it came about,
if anybody working on the project likes art and wants to contribute, they're like, you can come and visit it in the building that you built. It's amazing.
Is there any other projects in the last 3.5 years since you've been the healthcare sector lead at 849 that you've really stood out to you? Like, is there one in particular, or?
Well, I've been working on this for 3.5 years.
Yeah, right. So this one is kind of just getting to the construction phases.
Yeah.
But you've been helping with the design since day one, right? Probably since.
So there's some really interesting things that like we did an assessment on the Purdy building, which I can see still standing.
This is in Dartmouth?
And in Dartmouth. And so it's on that mental health campus, and we met with every department that works out of that campus. And we did kind of a big assessment of like what makes the most sense, kind of like a master plan. And we heard from all these departments that have been operating out of, like, I don't know, have you ever been in that building?
I'm trying to think if I have.
So I think they've been trying to tear it down for years, but they filmed
Is it close to the
horror
NSCC
movie
campus?
in the top floor.
Oh, really?
And it was like, it was scary. We went up there, like there's a cage that you get in the elevator that you go up, and I was with my
For the movie.
an intern. Well, that's just the elevator.
Right.
Like it just goes up to that floor. And then there, I had an intern with me, and she was like, "Oh my God, there's a Ouija board. Why would they do that?" Like it's just like,
Jeez.
and there's pigeons flying in and out. Like it is, yeah, it's a very good set for a horror movie.
Right, good, yeah.
But there's people working out of the building because there's space there and they need somewhere to go. Right. And they're providing these amazing community services for people that really need it. Mm. And they're keeping them out of the hospital, which is great. So it's this big, like, these are the people that need it the most. And so it was really awesome to go and talk to them all and to see what their needs are and how they're working in healthcare. Professionals are amazing at working with what they have. Mm-hmm. So they do workarounds constantly for the buildings that they're put in, not by choice. And they make it work because they have to. And so they're super adaptable and really flexible. But sometimes, and I remember meeting with one group in particular, and they do community groups, kind of group sessions. And they're like, okay, we're talking about the group room. We're trying to plan it out. Okay, what do you need in here for kind of equipment and furniture, and how big is it going to be, and what do you do in here? They're like, okay, well, we need a fridge. And I'm like, okay, sounds good. And how many chairs and how many people? And I was like, oh, do you like have snacks or something in the fridge? And so, and like as a nurse, I like those processes. Like I can understand like leading a group and how this would go. And so I'm kind of thinking about like all the steps you would do. And I try to think of how to do things more efficiently as an architect, because that often means like better system for the staff, so the staff can get to point A to point B easier, and the patients or the residents or the visitors or whatever don't get confused when they're getting into the building, because that is a huge barrier, especially for someone who has any kind of mental health issues, like or anxiety or anything. Like if I can't get in the building and I don't feel safe, I'm not going to go. And that's fair. So I try to really look at that and like, okay, what are some of your barriers and how do you like people get in? And so they're like, okay, we need a fridge. We're like, okay, then we kind of walk around and they're like, and it has to have a freezer. And I was like, oh, okay, what do you put in the freezer? And then she's like, ice. So one of the therapies is, and they teach people how to deal kind of with different kinds of emotions or outbursts at home so that they don't end up in the hospital. Great. It's great service. And one of the therapies is dunking your head into a bucket of cold water with ice in it. So it kind of shocks your system and kind of resets your system. It's something they can do at home, and it's something they teach in the class. And I was like, okay, so do you use the fridge like for snacks? And she's like, no, we just use the freezer. I was like, so you have an entire fridge just for the freezer, just for a bag of ice? She's like, yeah. And I was like, do you buy bags of ice? And she's like, yeah, we have an ice budget. And I was like, so could we get you an ice machine? And she was like, oh my God, an ice machine would be amazing. Right. I was like, simple, right? Yeah, but we had to get there. So if I didn't ask those questions, we wouldn't we would have just given them a residential style fridge because that's what they asked for, and they would be buying ice every week. Yeah. And so that's like somebody has to go get it. There's an ice budget, for Pete's sakes. And like really all we need is like a countertop ice machine. Takes up less space, less energy, and they can have as much ice as they want. And that's like
sounds like a bachelor party budget item.
Yeah, like we're gonna need an ice machine, a Slurpee machine. So it's that kind of stuff that really like it makes me happy to like we figured something out. Like we kind of got down to what they actually need and use in the space, and they can take that ice machine anywhere they get put in the building. 1,000
of those conversations just to completely design a building, a hospital or a healthcare center or an outpatient center or long-term care.
So that's my claim to fame is an ice machine.
It does give insight into what it's like with those simple things. You'd never think of that walking through the hospital.
No, yeah, and it's all these little things, and everybody in a hospital is so specialized. So that's why we have to meet with, like, this group of doctors does this group of doctors does this. This is a group of nurses. These are the home care people. These are the continuing care people. These are the
So New Waterford Hub, is that a 5-year ordeal for yourself? 6?
probably a bit more, depending on
Even 8.
Yeah. And that's typical for healthcare.
Yeah.
So by the
same
time
thing if you guys were working on the regional hospital, Cape Breton, that would be a 8 or 10, 12 year,
50.
50 years. It's your whole career.
Yeah. You
One job.
I've known people that have had healthcare careers for like 20.
I bet. Yeah.
20 years working on the same mics in Toronto or something. Yeah. Like it because they're such big projects and they're so.
Well, if you're Gaudi and you're in Spain, you're working on
that's a lifetime.
Sagrada Familia. That's like 160 years. You need 3 lifetimes.
Yeah, and then somebody tries
pass
to
the baton before
pick that up, and you're like, whoa.
Yeah, take this over. Sure, no problem.
Supposed to stay up? It's all upside down.
Yeah, no, big, large, complex projects, such a long duration. Do you find that that's more satisfying than working on several different small projects at once, or do you ever get I really wish I could move on?
No, well, I mean, sometimes you're like, oh, more of these. But no, because it keeps moving forward and there's so many pieces of it, and each phase is different and has its own challenges.
Yeah, it's like a new job. Every phase is like a new
every job. And even if I had a brand, like another New Waterford Hub, they would be different. Like even if it's like identical. Yeah. So when somebody's like, oh, we'll just pick this like typology or this long-term care building and we'll pop it down here, it'll be the exact same. It's never the exact same. Even if you did 2 Subway sandwich, it's never going to be the same. You're always going to have different stuff going on. And that's what I like about architecture. It's never the same. No 2 days are ever the same. It is not boring. And it's always a challenge, and you always get to like work through things. And then when you like are successful in like getting through a big phase, it's like a huge team effort, and everybody gets really excited about it, and they all get jazzed up for the next phase. So it's exciting that way. And the New Waterford Hub, because there's a few phases to it, and they're 2 totally different things. Then I'm trying to keep my team like, okay, you're the schools team, but now I'm trying to like get the healthcare team and trying to like share that knowledge between them. And so now people feel comfortable working with the school requirement and the health requirement, which is really interesting. So it doesn't pigeonhole people into one thing, and it kind of gives a broader sense or a broader appreciation for other aspects of the design. And I do like the small projects too, because they can be really fun and you can learn about different things, or like replacing a floor in a
it can probably be sometimes more challenging than some of the bigger ones.
Oh yeah, you're like, we didn't know that was in the wall.
Yeah.
There's a whole thing in here and nobody knows what it is or where it goes.
Yeah.
Especially in some of the hospitals that just get like renovated, and it's such complex systems. And
and is there often like a good track history of what's been left?
There's never
again.
They try, like we try, and there's as-built and stuff,
as-built drawings,
but you never know.
Some of them are old sketches probably that were done in the 50s, and take what you can get.
And it all depends on like what actually was built too. So like, well, this is what the drawings say was in there, but that was not the case. Or finding seaweed in the walls or something. Like there's always something exciting happening.
Yeah, they used to do that a lot. For our value.
That's
seaweed.
What you had.
Yeah.
So they just use the materials that were accessible.
Yeah.
I've seen newspaper.
Newspaper's another one.
Yeah, I've seen horsehair.
Oh, gee.
It's good in Alberta. There's some horsehair. Yeah. Huh. Just whatever you have to try to keep your family warm.
Let's see if Roxel has that on the coming out with.
That'll be the next
horsehair,
one. It'll be so expensive.
Roxel products. But this has been really, really neat to get to chat with you, Sarah.
Yeah, it was fun.
On behalf of A49 and just the neat backstory of nursing to architecture and New Waterford Hub, and obviously that's a really really cool upcoming project here in the province, and just to get some perspective from your point of view of that process and your whole journey. And this has been a real treat. Hopefully you've you've enjoyed your time with us, and
Yeah, it was fun.
yeah, we'd love to have A49 back on the show again too for some interesting topics. I'm sure there's lots of other projects that are
Oh yeah.
coming down the pipe that are not strange to people in the news and stuff like that. So lots of healthcare dollars being spent these days.
Yeah.
So really kind of.
There
I'm sure
are.
you feel that obviously, like with all the projects that are being tendered out.
There are.
in
Well, a lot
healthcare
of
especially.
things need some attention.
Yeah.
There was not a
Yeah.
lot
Sure.
done. And so now it's getting to the point where it really needs to be done. And the focus on long-term care is great
Yes.
because they desperately need
Yeah.
like some assistance, and they deserve to have nice places to live out their lives.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to trying to make that better.
Cool. Yeah. Well, good luck with that. And, on behalf of my grandmother and all the elders, I'm sure that are happy that you're on the case. And yeah, thanks for being with us. This
No
has
problem.
This has been great.
Yeah, it was awesome. Thanks for having me. This was a really fun experience.
Cheers. This episode is brought to you by Cook Insurance, your trusted insurance broker in Atlantic, Canada for 50 years. Insurance is complex, and the Cook team focuses on delivering comprehensive solutions for your construction needs, including builder's risk, wrap-up liability, performance bonds, and project-specific construction. A Navicord partner since 2020, Cook is one of the largest construction brokers in Canada and offers national strength with a local touch. Whatever your insurance needs are, Cook has you covered. We would like to take this time to thank a longtime sponsor of our media platform, FCA Surety. The brokers at FCA Surety are experts in all surety bonding categories and provide unparalleled service during the bonding process. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Atlantic Construction Podcast. Be sure to follow us on any podcast platform you use. You can also find us on LinkedIn and Instagram at Atlantic Construction Podcast. Be sure to send us a comment or a review. We'd love to engage with you.